You are not a master of your emotions. You are a hostage to your reactions. Most men and women move through the world as open nerves, twitching at every cold breeze, every slight, and every sudden shift in the social atmosphere. You believe you are thinking, but you are merely vibrating in response to external stimuli. If a single word from a stranger can ruin your day, or a digital notification can hijack your focus, you do not possess a mind. You possess a set of triggers that the world pulls at its leisure. To be reactive is to be a slave in a kingdom you were born to rule. The great illusion of modern life is the belief that venting or expressing every flicker of feeling is a form of authenticity. In reality, it is a form of structural collapse. Emotional discipline is not the suppression of feeling, it is the mastery of the space between what happens to you and what you do next. Viktor Frankl, amidst the most profound human suffering imaginable, identified this as the ultimate human freedom, the gap. In that gap lies your entire character. If that gap is non-existent, if the stimulus and the response are fused together, you are no different from a laboratory animal reacting to an electric floor. You are predictable, manageable, and ultimately weak. To become unshakable, we must first deconstruct the architecture of the reactive self. Your brain is a legacy system, an ancient machine designed for survival in a world of physical predators, now misfiring in a world of psychological phantoms. When you feel that heat in your chest during a confrontation, or that sinking weight when you are criticized, that is the amygdala attempting to protect a version of you that doesn't actually exist, the ego. The ego is a fragile, narrated ghost that demands constant validation and fears any form of diminishment. It is the ego that feels offended. It is the ego that feels the need to win a pointless argument. Emotional discipline begins with the cold realization that the ego is a liar and you are its primary victim. Consider the nature of water. When a stone is thrown into a shallow, turbulent pond, the water is displaced, the mud is stirred, and the clarity is lost instantly. But when that same stone is thrown into the deep, dark center of the ocean does not react. It absorbs. The stone sinks into the infinite depths, leaving barely a ripple on the surface. The ocean is not holding back its anger at the stone. The ocean is simply too vast for the stone to matter. This is the psychological foundation of the anchor. You do not become unshakable by building a wall. You become unshakable by increasing your depth until the stones of life, the insults, the failures, the stressors, simply lack the mass to disturb your core. Most people spend their lives decorating the surface of their pond, hoping no one throws a stone. They seek safe spaces and comfort, trying to control the external world so they never have to feel a tremor. This is a strategy of cowards, and it is doomed to fail. You cannot control the stones, but you can control the depth of your waters. The first step in this restructuring is the audit of the internal narrative. Whenever an event occurs, your mind performs a lightning-fast interpretation. It is never the event itself that disturbs you, but the story you tell yourself about the event. If someone cuts you off in traffic, the event is a car moving from one lane to another. The story is, "He disrespected me. He thinks he's more important than me. I must show him he's wrong." It is the story that creates the rage, not the car. To practice emotional discipline is to become a ruthless editor of these stories. It is to look at the raw data of reality and refuse to add the fiction of personal grievance. This process requires a radical shift in how you perceive control. Epictetus, the former slave turned philosopher, taught that the beginning of all wisdom is the dichotomy of control. There are things that are up to us and things that are not. Your reputation is not up to you. The weather is not up to you. The moods and opinions of your colleagues are not up to you. Only one thing sits within your fortress, your own faculty of judgment. When you invest your emotional well-being in things outside your fortress, you have effectively handed the keys of your kingdom to your enemies. You have made your inner peace a hostage to fortune. True strength is found in the proactive stillness. This is not the stillness of a statue, which is brittle and can be shattered. It is the stillness of a predator waiting in the high grass. It is a state of high readiness where you are observing the world without being absorbed by it. You see the insult. You feel the spike of adrenaline. You recognize the urge to strike back, and you do nothing. You watch the impulse as if it were a strange insect crawling across a table. You do not identify with it. You do not say, "I am angry." You say, "There is anger present in the system," and you wait for it to dissolve. This waiting is the Stoic Gap. It is the most powerful tool in the human psychological arsenal. In this gap, you are no longer a victim of your biology. You are an observer of it. By extending this gap from a millisecond to a second, from a second to a minute, you gain the ability to choose a response that aligns with your highest values rather than your lowest instincts. This is where the transition from a reactive child to a disciplined adult occurs. As we move deeper into this exploration, we must understand the mechanics of how this gap is maintained when the pressure increases. It is easy to be calm in a library. It is another matter entirely to remain the psychological anchor when the room is screaming, when the deadline is passing, and when the people you trust are failing you. The secret lies not in your willpower, which is a finite and fickle resource, but in the fundamental recalibration of your nervous system and the rejection of the urgency delusion. The world wants you to believe that everything is urgent. Every email, every social media trend, every minor conflict is framed as a crisis demanding an immediate emotional investment. This is a lie, designed to keep you in a state of low-level panic, because people in panic are easy to influence. To be unshakable is to realize that almost nothing requires an immediate emotional response. Silence is not a vacuum, it is a boundary. When you refuse to react instantly, you are signaling to yourself and to the world that you are the one who determines the tempo of your life. You are moving out of the frantic rhythm of the crowd and into a cadence of your own making, where the movements of the mind are deliberate, heavy, and final. To inhabit this cadence, one must undergo a surgical deconstruction of the urgency delusion. We live in a culture that treats a lack of immediate reaction as a lack of intelligence or passion. You are pressured to have an opinion the moment a headline breaks. You are expected to defend your pride the moment it is grazed. But the elite mind understands that speed is the enemy of depth. When you react quickly, you are using the oldest, most primitive parts of your brain. You are essentially letting a lizard run your life. To extend the Stoic Gap is to reclaim the prefrontal cortex, the seat of human reason, and to force your biology to submit to your philosophy. This submission is achieved through a process known as cognitive reframing. If the first part of discipline is creating the gap, the second part is what you do inside it. Most people use the gap to stoke the fire. They spend those few seconds of silence thinking of the perfect comeback or ruminating on how unfair the situation is. They are passive-aggressive, which is merely a delayed reaction, not a disciplined one. The disciplined mind, however, uses the gap to perform a logical audit. You must ask yourself, does this event have the power to change my character? If a coworker is rude, does that make you less honest? Does it make you less competent? If the answer is no, then the event is indifferent. It exists outside your fortress, and to let it in is an act of self-sabotage. we must look at the mechanics of social gravity. In any high-stress environment, a failing business meeting, a heated family argument, a public crisis, there is a vacuum of leadership. People are looking for a center of gravity. Most people simply mirror the anxiety of those around them, creating a feedback loop of chaos. When you maintain your stillness, you become the psychological anchor. You are the only person in the room not being moved by the wind. This creates a profound shift in power dynamics. Silence is often perceived as a threat by the weak because they cannot read you. They cannot find your triggers. By remaining unshakable, you force the other person to confront their own instability. You are not fighting them. You are providing a mirror in which their lack of discipline becomes painfully obvious. This is the law of least effort in social intelligence. The person who cares less about the external outcome of a social interaction always has the most power within it. This isn't about being cold or sociopathic. It is about being grounded in your own internal validation. When you do not need the other person to agree with you, apologize to you, or even like you, they lose all leverage. You become a black hole for their emotional projections. Their anger enters your field and simply disappears, finding nothing to latch onto. However, we must address the internal pressure cooker. Many believe that if they don't express their anger, it will build up and cause harm. This is a misunderstanding of how emotions function. Emotions are not steam in a pipe, they are chemical signals in the blood. If you do not feed the emotion with a narrative, the chemical signal has a half-life of approximately 90 seconds. If you are still angry after 10 minutes, it is because you are choosing to keep the anger alive by replaying the story in your head. Discipline is the refusal to tell the story. It is the ability to sit with the physical sensation of the emotion, the racing heart, the heat, without giving it a name or a target. You let the chemicals wash through you and dissipate into the earth. This leads us to the concept of amor fati, the love of fate. This is the highest level of emotional discipline. It is the transition from enduring a situation to utilizing it. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. An unshakable mind does not wish for fewer challenges. It looks at every frustration as a laboratory for its own development. A difficult person is not an annoyance. They are a weight in the gym of your character. A crisis is not a tragedy. It is an exam. When you adopt this mindset, the world loses its ability to victimize you. You cannot be a victim if you believe that everything that happens to you is fuel for your growth. But we must be careful not to mistake discipline for numbness. A stone is unshakable, but a stone is dead. The goal of the next chapter is not to turn you into a statue, but into a master of the flame. You still feel. You feel the sting of loss, the surge of joy, and the pull of fear, but you feel them as a mountain feels the weather. The mountain does not deny that it is raining. It does not pretend the wind isn't blowing, but the mountain does not move because of the rain. Your core, your hegemonicon, or ruling faculty, remains fixed while the weather of the mind fluctuates. To maintain this fixity, you must develop metacognition, the ability to think about your thinking. You must become a spy in your own head. You start to notice the physical precursors to an emotional break. You notice the slight tension in your jaw before you speak a sharp word. You notice the shallow breathing before you succumb to anxiety. These are your early warning systems. The disciplined mind catches the spark before it becomes a forest fire. You acknowledge the spark. Ah, there is the urge to defend my pride. And in that acknowledgement, the spark often goes out. The ego cannot survive being watched. It requires your total identification to thrive. The moment you observe your ego, you have already separated yourself from it. As we move toward the integration of these truths, we must confront the most difficult mechanic of all, the void of silence. In the gap between stimulus and response, there is a moment of pure emptiness where you have no script to follow. This is terrifying to most people. They fill the silence with noise, excuses, or apologies because they cannot stand the weight of being truly present and undecided. But the master of emotional discipline thrives in that void. In that silence, you are gathering your power. You are calculating the most effective, most virtuous path forward. You are moving from the frantic, "What should I do?" to the sovereign, "What will I allow?" This transition marks the end of your time as a reactive subject. You are no longer a piece on the board being moved by the hands of others. You are beginning to realize that the board itself is an illusion. Your only reality is the quality of your mind in this present moment. But theory is a ghost without practice. The psychological foundation is set. The mechanics of the gap are clear. Now we must discuss the practical integration, how you carry this weight into the world of flesh and blood, where the stakes are real and the silence is heavy. The transition from understanding to embodiment is the crossing of the final threshold. You have deconstructed the reactive self and identified the Stoic Gap. Now you must learn to live within it while the world attempts to pull you out. Integration is not a one-time event of the will, but a continuous atmospheric shift. You are no longer trying to be calm. You are becoming the environment in which calmness is the only possible outcome. This is the stage of the psychological anchor, where your internal stillness becomes so dense that it begins to influence the external reality of everyone around you. To practice this integration, you must embrace the voluntary hardship of the mind. Most people optimize their lives for comfort, which is why they break the moment that comfort is threatened. To be unshakable, you must intentionally seek out the friction you usually avoid. You must practice the pause in low-stakes environments so that it is available to you in the high-stakes ones. When you are waiting in a long line, do not reach for your phone to kill the boredom. Sit with the boredom. Observe the agitation rising in your chest as a curious phenomenon. By refusing to solve the minor discomfort of a wait, you are training your nervous system to handle the major discomfort of a crisis. You are building the muscle of non-reaction. Consider the social mirror effect. When you encounter someone who is projecting anger or irrationality, your biological instinct is to match their frequency. If they shout, you want to shout. If they are sarcastic, you want to be biting. This is entrainment, and it is the mark of a subordinate mind. The master practices disentrainment. When the other person's volume rises, yours remains steady, perhaps even dropping a decibel. When their pace quickens, yours slows. You are refusing to be governed by their emotional physics. This creates a psychological vacuum that the other person will eventually be forced to fill with their own realization of their absurdity. By remaining a fixed point, you force the chaos to organize itself around you. This leads to the practical application of the view from above. When an emotional storm hits, your perspective narrows until the problem is the only thing you can see. You are trapped in the now. Integration requires you to zoom out, to see yourself from the ceiling, then from the clouds, then from the stars. In the vast timeline of your life, let alone the history of the species, how much does this specific insult or this specific failure truly matter? This is not a way to diminish your responsibilities, but to diminish the emotional weight of them. By shrinking the problem, you expand your capacity to solve it. A man who is drowning cannot save anyone else. Only the man who knows the water is shallow can reach down and pull others to safety. We must also address the ethics of speech. A disciplined mind is a silent mind until the moment speech becomes a surgical necessity. Most words spoken in heat are not intended to communicate. They are intended to discharge internal pressure. They are a leak in your power. Before you speak, you must pass your words through 3 gates. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? If it fails any of these, the disciplined response is silence. This silence is not a sign of weakness or a lack of an answer. It is a sign of total containment. When you speak less, your words gain mass. They become voice of truth, heavy, deliberate, and impossible to ignore. As you integrate these shifts, you will notice a strange phenomenon. People will begin to rely on you. They will sense your lack of triggers and treat you as the safe harbor. This is the ultimate burden and the ultimate reward of emotional discipline. You become the psychological foundation for your family, your team, and your community. But you must remember that your stability is not for their approval. If you do it for their praise, you have merely traded one external master for another. You do it because it is the only way to live that is consistent with the dignity of a rational being. The final integration is the realization that there is no end to this process. There is no day where you will be perfectly unshakable and never feel the pull of the reactive self again. The ego is a persistent tenant. But the difference is that you are no longer fooled by its tantrums. You have seen behind the curtain. You know that the self that is supposedly being hurt or offended is a construction of thought, and thought can be restructured. We conclude not with a call to action, but with a call to stillness. The world is a storm of opinions, changes, and provocations. It will never stop trying to move you. It will never stop testing the depth of your ocean. But you now know the secret. The storm only has power over the surface. Deep down, where the core of your character resides, there is a silence that cannot be broken unless you give it away. Hold that silence. Guard that gap. Recognize that every moment of your life is a choice between being a puppet of your impulses or the master of your soul. The noise of the world will continue, but the next chapter of your existence is written in the moments where you feel the urge to break and you simply, quietly choose to remain. You are the anchor. The storm is irrelevant.